Okay, there's not many of you in here, but we better get started. So, you should introduce yourself to me, I think. But before I do that, I'll just say that my name is Andy Wigley, and I am a technical evangelist working for Microsoft in the UK. I have created a lot of videos for Microsoft Corp for video training for Windows Phone 8, and before that for Mango and actually for Windows Phone 7 when it first came out. So have any of you seen any of the Jumpstart videos? No? You're new to that? Okay, so they're all online on Channel 9. So I've done a lot of the videos that I used for training developers developing for Windows Phone. So can I ask you, how many of you are currently Windows Phone developers? A couple of you, okay, that's cool. And you're developing for Windows Phone 8 already? Okay, all right, cool. So what I want to do with this presentation is, Windows Phone 8, of course, is a huge release with very many great features in it, and some are easier to implement than others. So what I'm going to pick out with this presentation is 5 of the kind of ones that give you great value, that have big impact, but are actually quite easy to implement. So they're high value features that really don't take a lot of development effort to add them as features to your application. So 5 new features that we've added in Windows Phone 8. And those 5 features are, first of all, the most important, of course, the tile formats, the Windows Phone 8 tile formats. We've got great new templates, and tiles are the feature that really makes our platform stand apart from the competition. So it's worth spending some time on those. And then there's lock screen notifications and the lock screen background image. Very easy to implement and actually builds on top of the tiles story. We've got 3 new screen resolutions on Windows Phone. Now, normally you might think 3 different screen sizes would be a complete pain as a developer, but actually the way it's been done, it's very, very easy for you as a developer to take advantage of that. And then some fun features. Speech commands are actually, well, they're fun to program, but they're also a great way for users to be able to launch your app. So I'll show you how that works. And then finally, we'll touch very briefly on NFC. I've got another session tomorrow morning which is more focused on networking, and I'll go into NFC and Bluetooth in more detail in that. But at its simplest, you can use NFC to tap and share your app very easily. So first of all, tiles. So like I said, I read a review recently, or a blog post by an Apple iPhone user who had switched to Windows Phone. And they didn't regret it, they loved Windows Phone. But the key thing the big difference that they said was the tiles was great, and the whole fluidity of the interface was nice, the touch and feel is great. And they said the tiles is great, but he felt that it wasn't really taken advantage of enough. And that's probably true. It's such a great feature, and it's often added as the last thing you do when you deliver an app. So it's really worth spending a bit more time thinking about what you can do with tiles. So first of all, what are live tiles? They are, of course, quick shortcuts to an app. You can tap on a tile on the start screen and it will launch your app. And apps can create additional tiles, so you can have more than one tile per app, and each of those tiles can launch into your app at a different place. So they are context sensitive, they give a unique experience to the user. So in Phone 7.1 we only had 1 tile size, but on Phone 8 we've got 3. We've got the small, the medium and the large tile sizes, and those are all available to you as an application developer. 3 different templates. We've got the flip template, which is very similar to the one we had on Windows Phone 7. And that flips from front to back, as the name suggests, and you as the developer can write stuff both onto the front and onto the back of the tile. The middle one there is the iconic one. This is designed to be a very clean format that's designed to reflect the Windows Phone design language, so it fits in very nicely with the look and feel, the design feel of the phone. And then the last one, the cycle template, you can give it a list of up to 9 images, and it animates nicely between them. So it'll show each of them in turn, and it drifts around the image, and there's nice animations on that. When you are creating images, those are the sizes you have to supply in pixels. So the small one, 159 by 159, 336 square for the medium, and 691, 336 for the wide. You notice the iconic one is quite smaller, but that's because it's just the image on the tile, and the rest of it is the user's accent color. What you're doing here is I mentioned I'm going to talk about the 3 screen resolutions. And we now have high-resolution Windows phones. And what you do when you provide these icons is you're sizing them for the high-resolution phone. And when the app is run on a low-resolution phone, the system automatically scales them down. So every tile template has got a whole bunch of properties that you can set. So you can see them all called out on here for the flip tile. This one, like I said, flips from front to back. Unless it's the small size, which doesn't flip. But you can set the title, you can set the count on the front, you can obviously set the background image, and then on the back, there's a background image, there's the back content, which is a longer string you can put on there, and then also on the wide tile, you've got even more text you can put on there, and a back title. So you've got lots to play with, and like I said, it's worth taking advantage of these and making really great tiles. Here's the cycle tile. With this, you just simply supply the title, an optional count. The count thing doesn't appear if you don't specify it. And then you give it this list of up to 9 images, and it will cycle between them. And this is the iconic one. Like I said, it's a smaller image, because the white circle you can see on there, that's the image. You just supply a white image on a transparent background, and the background color is just the user's accent color. So I'm sure have you all got Windows phones? Who's got a Windows phone in here? Okay, just a few of you got Windows phones. Well, one of the nice things you can do with a Windows phone is you can select the background color you want to have that day. So you can wake up in the morning and think, do you know what, this feels like a red day, and you select the red color, or there's about 14 different colors you can select. So the application tile, the only way that there's always one tile that always exists regardless of what's happened. So this is the application tile, otherwise known as the primary tile. The only way that one ever gets onto the start screen is when the user goes onto the apps list, you can see there, and taps and holds on the program and says pin to start. That's the only way that one will make it onto the start screen. And you set the properties for that tile, the application tile, in the application manifest, the initial ones. You can change them programmatically after the app has been installed, so you can run code to change them. The other ones, secondary tiles, you will create them in code as a result of user interacting with your app. So you can create great experiences, and each secondary tile has a unique navigation URI, so they can go to a special page in your application. Now, part of this talk is talking about moving from Windows Phone 7 to the richness of Windows Phone 8. So the first things to talk about in connection with that is how you can actually take advantage. You can keep your code base as a 7.1 app, and still, when your app is running on a Windows Phone 7.8 device or on a Windows Phone 8 device, you can still have the new tiles. So there's a technique for doing that. So if you're thinking about upgrading your app from 7.1 to 8 as a developer, well, the first thing you might choose to do is actually not to upgrade it at all, because you can still use the new tile formats when it's running on those devices that support it. And you can do this using a technique called reflection, which simply is it's a messy coding technique that allows you to see whether the app is, your 7.1 app is running on a 7.8 or an 8 device. It basically looks for the presence of a particular assembly in the core libraries. And if it finds it there, then it can invoke the tile APIs. But that's the hard way of doing it, using reflection, because the easy way of doing it is to go onto NuGet, and there's a package on there called Mango Polo. And Mango Polo gives you the Windows Phone 8 tile APIs to program against, and it hides all the reflection within it. So they've done all the work for you. This is definitely the way to do it. Of course, though, at some point you're going to say, do you know what, I want not more than the tiles, I want loads of the other great Windows Phone 8 features. I want NFC, and I want the lock screen, and I want in-app purchase, and I want to start using Bluetooth, all these great features that we've got in Windows Phone 8. So when you want to do that, you then need to upgrade your project. And at its simplest, all that is to open it in Visual Studio, right-click, and say, on the project, and there's an option on the menu, upgrade to 8. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Certain things like certain of the controls, such as the pivot control and the panorama controls, which you'll use frequently for doing the main UI of your app, those have moved from external assembly into a different assembly. So you have to change some of the namespace declarations in your XAML, and fix up your references. But essentially, the technique is fairly straightforward. And then, having upgraded to 8, then you'll need to set up the new tile templates. The easy way to do that is actually to create a new empty Windows Phone 8 project and simply copy from the assets. You'll find in there, in the assets folder, there's a subfolder called tiles, and in there's some placeholder images which are exactly the right size for what you need for the images for your new tiles. So just copy it across and then replace the placeholder images with your own artwork. And you can set this using the new manifest editor. So this is just an XML file, but in Windows Phone 8 SDK, we've now got a nice UI editor to edit this manifest and set data into it. So let's do a demo of this. So here's Visual Studio. I've got a project called the Contoso Cookbook. This is a 7.1 project, but as you can see, it's got, we've added the new tiles sizes into it. I just hover over it, you can see that these are on it. So first of all, I'm going to, this is using the Mango Polo NuGet package. So you can go to Add, Manage NuGet Packages, and I'll go off to NuGet, and there's a list of all the packages, and if you search for Mango Polo, there's actually 2 libraries. This one's already installed, Mango Polo, which is the full-fledged one. It's not only got tile stuff in there, but it's got a bunch of other useful methods in it. But the other one, mangopolo.lite, allows you to update tiles from a background agent. So in a background agent, you can't have any dependencies on any UI assemblies. So mangopolo.lite allows you to update tiles from a background agent on a 7.1 app. So this package has been installed, and this allows you to use this kind of code. We have a mangopolo.tiles.fliptile data. So this fliptile data object is exactly the same as the true fliptile data in Windows Phone 8. But this is now going to run on, so I'm going to set a breakpoint on there. I'm going to run it on the 7.1 emulator. So that's installing onto the emulator, which I'm hoping is going to pop to the front in a minute. If not, I'll have to go and find it. There we go. So here's the Contoso Cookbook. This is the app I'm going to use for a few of these demos this morning. We've stopped at this breakpoint, and it's saying there's a method in the Mango Polo. Can this use the live tiles? And it's coming back false because this is a 7.1 device. So we can continue, and it's running on a 7.1 device. And the app looks like this. It's a cookbook, you get different regions here. You can select which region you're interested in. Let's go and look at Italian cookery. And then you get a home page, and this is a pivot, and then here's all the recipes, and you can see there's tiramisu. So you can go off and look at the tiramisu page, and there's the recipe and the ingredients, and you can also take pictures and that sort of. So this is the app. Now on the, if we just come out of that, and here we can pin it to start. So pin the start, and this is a 7.1. So it's a 7.1 tiles. The only thing you can do is pin it or unpin it. That's all you can do on a 7 device. So if we now run, let's kill that one. If we now actually instead run on the 7.8 emulator, we'll hit the same breakpoint, and this time can use live tiles comes back as true, as it would on a Windows Phone 8 device. So now we can go in and set all the tile properties and let it run on. And of course it's the same app. We go and pin this one to the start screen. Pin to start. So 7.8 has the new tile format, so now we can actually make it a small tile or we can make it a big tile. And this is a flip tile, and it's actually written to the back of the tile as well, so it shows the richness that you can do even if you keep your app as a 7.1 app. And there we got some text on the back. So just to, and that's the 7.8 one. I've also, in this sample, just for your interest, this is the clean way of doing it using Mango Polo, which is exactly the same as you would code it on Windows Phone 8. But I've actually got the reflection method in here. It's all grayed out because it's hash if deft out. But you can see this is the kind of reflection you have to do. So it does work, but it's ugly code and error prone, and you have to get the constructor and you set properties like this. So it's all kind of difficult. So Mango Polo is definitely the way to go. That's, instead of all that code below, you've got this nice clean code here. So anyway, that's the 7.1 making use of the new tiles. But actually I'm going to just remove that from the solution, because also in this same solution, if I can find it, there we go. In this same solution, I've got a version 8 of this, which has been upgraded. And we've got the right tiles and all the tile templates. Now this time, I can now edit in the app manifest editor. That's what this is. I'll just close it again. So here's the app manifest editor, and you can put a title on it. Then we have to select the particular images. So there's the flip tile site, small, medium, and large. Oh no, I have to tick that, support for large tiles, so we go large, there we go. And that's set that in, and this is now a fully fledged Windows Phone 8 solution. So now we can run that on the Windows Phone 8 emulator, and we're in a fully Windows Phone 8 app. Off to the start screen, we can go and pin that. And of course you get the same experience that we had on the 7.8 device. So we can keep it small or we can unpin it altogether. I'm just going to uninstall that because I'm now going to just switch over to a slightly different solution so we can play a bit more with the tiles. So this one, the next one I want to show you has got all of the different tile templates so you can see what they all look like. It's essentially the same app, but it's got some interesting other features in it. So first of all, let's just deploy that one. And we'll go and pin it to the start screen. Pin to start. And there's our, let's just make it a wide tile. So there we go. It's Contoso Cookbook, the best recipes from around the world. It's an iconic one, this. So this is the iconic, is the main one. Now what actually happens when you visit the app and you go to a particular region, it actually records. Let's go to Indian. And I've got here, here's a breakpoint. in the on navigated to, so we can just step through all of this. There's some navigation stuff, a bit of loading the data. But here's where it gets interesting. Features.tile to update main tile, and this calls out, if I'm going to step into that, here we go, here's the update main tile, and this is the code that's finding the application tile. That's how you find it, shell tile to add to tiles. Then we are resetting the iconic tile data object, but what we're doing is we're going to set, if you look down here, we're going to set the strings to recent activity, some information about the group that we've just visited. So I'm going to let that run. And now if we go back to the start, if we go back to the start screen and find our tile, which is down at the bottom, you'll see now it's already updated it with the information. Go back in. And I'll take that breakpoint out now, and then we'll continue. And then the next thing you can do is if you particularly like a particular region, let's say I love French cookery, there's on the app bar there's a button on here which at the moment says pin. If I hit pin, we get a secondary tile gets created. And this secondary tile, I'm going to make that big as well. This is the cycle tile. So what it's done is taken all the pictures of all the recipes in that group, and now it's going to navigate between them. So in a minute it'll switch on to the next one. So we're currently looking at quiche Lorraine, and now it's on to macaroons. And of course, this is a different context sensitive. So the main tile goes to the main page, but this one will of course go directly to the French page. So it's got a navigation URI that takes you straight there. And then if you've got a particular favorite, maybe we love venison, so we can go to venison. There's a heart thing on here as well. So here's the venison recipe. So this one also makes a secondary tile, but this one is the third tile template. So again, I'll make that a big one. So now we're looking at all three tile templates. You've got iconic at the top here. This one in the middle is the cycle tile, and then this one is the flip tile, which shows you a bit of the recipe on the back. Not very readable. It should be black and white really, but there you go. So you can see the three different tile templates. And like I said when I started this piece, it's really worth making effort on your tiles, and particularly not just having static ones, having ones that are updating as the user interacts with your app, as this has shown you, or how you give the option for the users to pin favorite features to the start screen. Users love this, and apps that use these features are usually get good, high ratings in the App Store. And also update them from background agents so that they are alive even when the user isn't using your app. You could have a background agent that's running, goes off to a service and pulls back some new information and uses that to update the tiles. These are the features that make apps live apps and makes them special and connect well with the user. So it's really worth making a lot of trouble to make sure that you do your best work around the tiles. So that was my first of the 5. It's quite simple, obviously, as you can see, to do tile stuff. Another one that's kind of comes from the same area, really, is the lock screen notifications. So lock screen notifications and the background image, on Windows Phone 7, that area at the bottom you can see there, on the bottom of the screen, was only available to what we call first-party apps. So only the built-in apps like the calendar, like email, would have, and the calendar would have your next appointment underneath the date there. And along the bottom, all you could see was a little count and an icon for missed calls, missed text messages, unread email, this kind of thing, which is still what most people want to see. But the difference now is that your app could also be one of the apps that can put information there. So in Windows Phone 8, the user can go into the lock screen settings, which is the right-hand screen there, and you'll see the 5 squares along the bottom. They can tap on that to select which apps are the ones that are showing a little icon and a count on the bottom. So at the moment we've got 2 little counts showing and on the bottom there. And also just above it, you can see where it says calendar on the notification, on the lock screen settings. That's the app that you are selecting to give detailed information. And most people are going to want to keep it as calendar. That's the obvious one to have on the lock screen. But the beauty is that now users can select any app that has registered to be the lock screen text info provider. And to actually set your app up to do this is incredibly easy. First of all, you need that little icon that shows at the bottom. So that's a tiny little 24 by 24 pixel icon. And you need to include that as content in your project. The default name is lockicon.png. And then you need to edit the manifest. Now this is something you can't edit using the GUI editor. You've actually got to open it as a text file and go in and enter this information yourself. So in the device lock image URI, you can put the actual name of your icon, of the little image that you are supplying. That's inside the token, primary token element, as you can see there. And then, if you want to be one of the apps that the user can select as one of the little summary, the 5 along the bottom, you need to put that top extension in, the extension name lock screen notification icon count. If you want to be the app that supplies the detailed information, where the calendar usually is, then you have to put that second extension element in, lock screen notification text field. And of course you can do both. Having done that, where do the notifications come from? Well, it comes straight off your application tile. So the same stuff I just showed you about updating tiles, the count and the text is taken directly from the front of your application's primary tile. Now, secondary tiles don't have any effect on that. And that's independent of whether the primary application tile is pinned to the start screen or not. So it just works. So you just update your primary tile content in the normal way, and that will cause the count and the text, if that's been selected by the user, to update on the lock screen. We have got a great tool in the Windows Phone 8 SDK that allows you to test this out on the emulator. There's the simulation dashboard, which allows you to do a whole bunch of stuff, such as simulate a slow network, which can be handy if you're doing network-based stuff. But down the bottom there, you can see you can select the lock screen to be locked or unlocked. So the next version of the Contoso Cookbook has this built into it. And I'll just uninstall that one, so we get this new version in. So the new version is the same as the one you saw before, with the difference being that when you choose a recipe you particularly like, such as a bouillabaisse. Oh, well, before I do that, yeah, let's just, before I hit that, I want to just show you the manifest. So I'm going to edit this, open with source text editor, and here is the actual raw version of it. And there's the device lock image URI, and with the path assets icons lock icon.png, and here down here is the extensions that say, yes, I want to be available as a lock screen icon count provider, and yes, I want to be a lock screen notification text provider, and also this is about the lock screen background, which is the background image, which is the third one of this group. So with this in place, now I've deployed it, go back to there. Before I go back into this, let's just go and switch over into the settings. And go to the lock screen. And now I can, down here, I can choose Contoso Cookbook. Just because those extension elements are in my manifest, your app will now turn up in this list. So I can select that, so it's got the little whisk symbol there. And we can also select Contoso Cookbook as be the detailed status. Now, having done that, I'll go to the simulation dashboard. and on there I can now lock the emulator. And now there we go, Contosa Cookbook is there with our count of 6, that's come straight off the tile. And there's that text, the recent activity about browse the French group, the total of 6 recipes. So that's the first bit of that. Let's just unlock it again. So now we're back where we were, and let's go back to our app, where we were. Here we go. So this is the other feature, the lock screen background. If I hit the like there, we get into this lock screen manager is provided by current application. And what this does, if I just F10 through this, step through that, is you'll see this dialog come up. So you have to request permission from the user to be the lock screen background image provider. So you say, yes, I'm happy for that. And what happens then is that the lock screen image will become this picture. So now we've got permission. We are now the designated lock screen image provider. And then there's this other API, lock screen manager is provided by current application. If this returns true, which it will do now, we can then set the lock screen image. So again, let's just lock that, and the emulator has now got our picture as the lock screen image. So you can set the background lock screen image in a background agent or from within your app. So a lot of weather apps do this sort of thing, and they put a custom image up there which shows the weather that's coming up over the next day or so on the lock screen. Those kind of things are very popular. But that's an example of how you can make use of that feature. So it's really very simple. So this is a summary of what we saw with the lock screen background. By default, the user can choose between an app, or they can get the Bing image of the day, or they can choose one of their own photos as being the lock screen image provider. But as you saw there, with the application setting that element into the manifest, then your app can also be one of the providers of the lock screen image. And that's the code we saw. The important thing is this lock screen manager request access async, which when you call that, puts that dialog up. It always remains under the user's control. There's no way an application can take over the lock screen without the user giving permission. One tip about this, when you're using images that are shipped in your app, you have to use this new application URI syntax to give the path to your image that you are, when you call lockscreen.setImageURI. So if you shipped it as content in your app, that's an ms-appx : / and then the name of your image. If you want to use an image stored in the local folder, it's the root of the local folder is ms-appdata : / local /, so lots of slashes in there. And then the image has to be in the shared shell content folder or a subdirectory of that for this to work. That's a thing that trips a lot of people up. Right. The third one I'm talking about here. How about supporting these 3 different screen resolutions? So we've got 3 resolutions on Windows Phone. Windows Phone 7, all we had was 800 by 480, the WVGA, and they're very nice devices, very nice screens. But we've now got, with Windows Phone 8, we've got WXGA and 720p. WXGA, if you'll notice there, the important thing to realize is the aspect ratio is the same for those two, 15:9, 15:9 in the middle one, WXGA. And on the 720p one, that's slightly different, it's 16:9, so it's slightly taller. But the important thing to realize here is that at runtime, you don't have to worry about it. So we're working now with something, you can call them device-independent pixels, if you like. In Windows Phone 7, we've always designed to an 800 by 480 screen. So essentially, the message here is you carry on developing to an 800 by 480 screen. Because the aspect ratio is exactly the same. That will give you exactly the same layout on a WVGA and on a WXGA. Now, on a 720p, the hardware scaling, which is done by the GPU at runtime, the hardware scaling factor is 1.5, not 1.6. So what this ends up is an effective size of 853 by 480. So it's the same width, but a slightly higher screen. You've got an extra 53 pixels to play with there. So if you're a conscientious, you don't have to do anything about that. If you don't, there'll be a small bit of banding on the top of your app. But obviously, as professional software developers, that's not good enough. So we want to make sure that our application scales well when it's running on a 720p phone. So this is what it looks like on the scaled resolutions. Exactly the same for WVGA and WXGA. Slightly taller for the 720p. So how do you handle this? Well, with this, the auto-size rows in grid is your friend. So if you're doing phone development and you're positioning everything at exact pixel locations, that's probably not the great way to do it. You probably want to be making sure you're using grids and using rows intelligently. So here's an example actually taken from the Contoso cookbook. We've got 3 rows. The top row is explicitly sized as 240 pixels. The bottom row has been given a height of auto, which means it will get a size according to the visible elements that are in it at runtime. So effectively, that's a fixed size because it's kind of inherits from whatever's placed in that row. But then the middle one is the star row. The star row is the one that allows us to do flexible layout, because that will basically means take all the size that's left, and you can have multiple star rows and it will just divide them up between the star rows, and you can put a weighting factor on them. So this becomes really useful when you consider the recipe details page in the Contoso cookbook. That 240 is where the image goes, and that's always 240. It's explicitly sized like that. And that bottom row, which was sized as an auto row, has actually got a stack panel in it with a label that says prep time, text block, and then the number of minutes that it'll take to make it. So it's effectively one text block high. So effectively, it's a fixed size. And then the directions row is given this autos, this star size, so it gets everything that's left, which means it will grow on a 720p phone. What about images on high-res phones? So the rule generally is, for Windows Phone 8, is you provide images that are appropriate for and sized for the high-resolution phone, for the WXGA. And they will just get scaled down at runtime to the appropriate size when it's running on a low-resolution phone. And that's probably great for 99% of all apps, but if you are a real pixel-perfect sort of a guy, you're going to want to make sure that you're making the absolute most of the higher resolution. Then you can supply different resolution images and load them in at runtime. There's a application.current.host.content.scale factor. You can get that at runtime, and that returns that scaling factor. So it will return 1.0 if you're running on a WVGA, the low res. It will return 1.6 if you're running on WXGA, the high res, and it will return 1.5 if you're running on the 720p. So you can figure out what phone you're running on, and then you can load the image in as appropriate at runtime. So here I've got an example that shows how that works. And let's just, oh, hey, I've got my locked screen still. Tools, simulation dashboard. Let's bring that out. Unlock it. There we go. Right, and I'm just going to get rid of, no, I didn't want to do that. Get rid of that. Uninstall it, so we don't get any unexpected stuff. Right, now this, So this is let's look at the recipe detail page here first. This is the page that shows the details of the recipe. Oh, well, let's build it. And just reload the recipe detail page. It doesn't want to show the recipe details page. Okay, let's just look at it doesn't want to show the designer anyway. Let's look at the XAML, which is what I wanted to look at anyway. So here's the recipe grid. Is a grid element where we show the details of the recipe. It's actually got 2 columns, I won't go into that, but we've got 4 rows, in fact. So we've got an auto one at the top, 240, an auto one at the bottom, and here's one which is, it doesn't say anything, that means a star row. So if I run this on the emulator, and go to a particular, let's go to a Chinese, to a particular recipe, let's go to Asian pear. Well, that's not a very good choice because it's got no instructions. Let's try a different one. Gosh, these Chinese recipes, they don't bother doing anything, do they? Okay, there's a little bit in there. So there's an example of that. And if we run the same thing, but on a 720p, so that'll just boot up that other emulator. And while that's doing that, I'm just going to go and find the... let's actually go to a French recipe then and try and find one with a bit longer instructions in it. Quiche Lorraine, there we go. So there's the instructions. And here's the 720p. I'm just going to shrink that down a little bit. Maybe not. Let's go to 50. I want to try and make them the same size. So, I wonder if I do 40. Well, that will do it. Close enough. So, French, quiche Lorraine. No, let's make it 45. Try and make these the same. Yeah, there we go. So here you can see you're actually seeing, because it's a slightly taller phone, you're seeing rather more of the recipe. So this is the standard resolution, and this one actually is sized. It's automatically gone out to take advantage of the size. So you haven't got any banding at the top, which you would have if you hadn't taken that trouble. So it's relatively easy, and you probably, if you're using tables properly, you've probably almost got your apps already in good shape for 720p without you having to do any work. All right. Now let's have a little more fun. Speech commands. So speech commands are a great way for users to interact with your app. And Windows Phone, actually, a lot of people don't know this, but on Windows Phone 7, you've always been able to launch an app with speech on Windows Phone 7. I actually didn't know this, and I'm supposed to be a Windows Phone expert. But you can press and hold on the Windows button at the bottom of the screen and say something like start Instagram or whatever, and it will launch it at the start screen. So you've always been able to do that. But in Windows, but you couldn't actually have your app speak out anything, or you couldn't have your app recognize any speech. So in Windows Phone 8, we've got really great speech support. We not only have a great speech synthesis feature, so your app can actually talk. You've also got great speech recognition, so it can recognize speech, but you can also, we've got a really rich way of launching apps with voice commands. As it says there, speech reco needs an internet connection, but the speech synthesis does not. Voice commands does not need an internet connection. So to do this in Windows Phone 8, you have to create an XML file to define the voice commands. It's a VCD file, and that needs to be run at least once. So you need to have the app deployed and then run once, and that installs the voice commands. And the example I'm going to use for this is an app called the Fortune Teller. So it will tell you your future. It's a little bit of fun. It's not a serious app. You can ask it questions and it will display replies. So this is an example of a VCD. Now this is an English example, and just to anticipate one of your questions, you can have multiple languages in a VCD file, including Russian. So this is an English example, and this is the ways you can launch the fortune teller app. So I'm just going to drill down into this. So this is every command you give to launch this app has to start with this phrase, fortune teller. And there's a really good built-in help system, which I'll show you in a minute. So this example is part of that help system. So here you're giving an example of the kind of commands that a user can give to fortune teller. Will I find money? And then we actually start, this is where you define a command. And you can have multiple commands in a voice command file. So this command is called show money. And each command has an example as well for the help system. So this is the example for this one is will I find money? And then this is actually what it is going to listen for. So this is the trigger. So the command will say fortune teller, will I find? But actually this is in square brackets. So this little bit is optional. And then the next bit, this is another bit of the phrase, and this is in curly brackets because this actually is variable. So this future money is the name of that phrase list at the bottom. So the options for this command are will I find money, will I find riches, or will I find gold? They're all different ways of asking the same command. Then there's some feedback. The system will talk back to you to say that it recognizes what you've asked it. So this is what it will say back to you. And then you've got a navigate target. So this is the page in your app where it is going to navigate to. So you can actually have different voice commands launching to different pages. And like I said, this is the phrase list which you can use to introduce variable content into a voice command. And having created your VCD file, you then need to execute this command, this statement, at least once. This actually installs that into the system. And after this, the system will recognize voice commands and will launch your app. So once that is installed, and you've now, when the user then presses and holds the Windows button and says fortune teller, will I find gold, it will respond with showing gold, and then it will launch your app to that page, money.xaml. And when it launches into that page, you get a query string passed into the page, which you will look at in your code in onNavigated2 to find out how that page has been launched. So you can figure out that you've been launched as a result of a voice command. So this is the kind of code you will have in your onNavigated2. You're looking for something in the query string with a key of voice command name. And this is where you're looking for show money or tell joke or whatever the other commands are that you've defined in this thing. And you also get in the query string, if you've got a variable element like this future money variable phrase list, you can actually find out which particular one from that variable list they selected by looking at the future money or the name of the phrase list. Right, enough talk, let's give this a go. And you can do all this, it turns out, on the emulator, which is great. So here's the fortune teller app. Here's the VCD file, all of it. We've got various different commands, so I'm going to run this on the emulator. And we've hit a breakpoint because we're running the app. It's just loading. So this is before I say it can go, I'm just going to go back to the start screen and tap and hold. This is the default. It's a bit delayed, but this is the default thing for the first time you ever activate the voice feature on a Windows phone. Gives you some examples. You can actually open your calendar and find, you can get it to go off and do searches in search for coffee shops or bookshops. You can get it to make phone calls, and you can send text messages. So there's all sorts of different things built in. Oh, I didn't do it quick enough. So I'll do that again. This time I should accept it. And now it's saying listening, so I can say something like show calendar. And this is all the built-in functionality that's built in before you even start bringing apps into this.
We're sorry, but we can't access the network right now.
That's not a good sign, but voice rec is needed for that. But the key thing about this is, you see this thing up here? This is the apps as well. There's the common things. This is the help system. And at the moment, there are no apps installed on this system that have installed a voice command. So you don't have any apps. So we can just ignore that. Now, I'm going to let this code, we're stuck on this breakpoint, so I'm now going to let it run. That will install the voice command file for my thing. So now, when I tap and hold and hit help and go over to apps, fortune teller is there. And it says this is the built-in help system. And it gives you examples. You know, will I find money? Will I find love? So let's give it a go. Fortune teller, will I find money?
Showing money.
And it launches fortune teller, and it gives us this nice bit of philosophy there. It says, fortunately, there is more to life than money, so you don't have to worry about this. Let's try it again. Fortune teller, will I find love?
Showing love.
Okay, I'm a software engineer. Apparently we don't have romance if you're a software engineer, which we all know is not true, of course. And I've got one more in here as well. So we got fortune teller, tell us a joke.
Finding a joke for you.
Oh, and this is, hit that same, we're just reinstalling that for good measure.
What cheese do you use to coax a bear out of the woods? Camembert.
Now, I appreciate that in a non-English speaking audience, this joke probably just like, I mean, even Americans don't get this joke. So it's I have to explain it. So what cheese do you use to coax a bear out of the woods, to get a bear to come out of the trees? Camembert, which sounds a bit like come on bear. You see, yeah, it's a rubbish joke. Anyway, I thought for this particular audience, I'd try and do one in Russian. So we've got another one. Fortune teller, tell us a joke in Russian.
Finding a joke for you.
Now, this is where you use the speech synthesizer. So I'm using a synth to actually speak it out as well.
Как вы поймать белку? Подняться в дерево и действовать, как орех.
Oh, thank you. Did that make sense? I used Bing Translator, so I didn't check it with anybody. It could be really rude for all I know, but anyway, there you go. But the fun bit is fun, but it also shows that you can actually, this Russian speech synthesis and recognition as well with this system, so that's really cool. Okay. Right, the final one is a very short, nice little one about NFC. So, NFC is this really, really close communications thing. So the devices have to be a few centimeters apart to communicate. So it's usually used for things like tap to connect, tap to exchange something, or tap to share. And it's real fun to work with because it opens up some interesting application things that you can do. I was at the Mobile World Congress show in Barcelona a couple of months ago, and that is a huge, huge show. There's like 75,000 people go to that show. And of course, security is a big problem at that show. So if you are unlucky enough to arrive at the security gates at the entrance to the venue around about 9:30 a.m., the queue is like immense because everybody has to have their badge checked and they have to have their photo checked, you know, and make sure the badge is legal. And there's loads and loads of booths with security guards in them. And a curious thing happens, you see. Actually, at that show, I realized that most of the people standing in that line have had iPhones, because the iPhone does not have NFC support. Because on the right, they have some NFC gates, and when you registered, you were asked a question, do you have an NFC phone? And they asked a drop-down, so Nokia Lumias, HTCs, so Windows Phone, most of the higher-end devices have got NFC. Also, Android, a lot of Android devices, the Samsung Galaxy has NFC. So if you had an NFC phone, you could install the NFC badge application. And when you registered at the conference, previously you uploaded a photo, and then when you registered at the conference, they checked your ID and made sure the photo was really you, and then they activated the NFC badge app. So this was really cool, because then when you come up to security, you just activate the app on your phone, tap your phone on the NFC reader, your photo comes up on the monitor, and the security waves you through, and it takes no time at all. Whereas if you're stood in the long lines, they have to look at your badge and check your photo and all this kind of stuff. So that's one good example of how NFC is really cool. Now, you can use it for tap to connect. I'll show an example of this tomorrow morning. So you can tap two phones together, and it's used to set up a high bandwidth connection. So NFC is just to make the initial connection, and then after that you get a Bluetooth or a Wi-Fi connection to do communication. Or you can read smart tags on posters. So this is kind of the new version of QR codes. So instead you've got an NFC, you tap it on an NFC chip on a poster, and it'll give you some content. Or you can exchange your business card or this kind of thing. But one thing that you can also do with it is you can actually use it to send URIs across to another. So you can send a small text message, or you can send a URI. And a URI can be a Zoom :navigate URI, which is the URI of your app in the store. So this allows you a nice, easy way of sharing your app with another person. So I've got a demo here. It's actually a game. It's actually in the store. This is a game I wrote. It uses NFC to set up the connection between the two devices. But the interesting thing about it, that it's also got this tap to share page in it, which has logic like this. Very simple, the code I just showed you. Make sure NFC is enabled, then just publish this URI, which is this is the ID of my app in the store. So you can do things like this. Let's get this DUV up. Allow. So here's the application. I've got this application running on two devices. So tic-tac-toe, which is a game noughts and crosses. I can tap the new game button to start, and then it will say tap to connect. And I can do it on this other phone here. And of course it will start the game, which won't be very interesting. So I'm going to reverse that and do it on this one, so you can see the experience. And now I'm going to tap the two together. Oh, rubbish. I just hit the off button by accident. There we go. Tap them together. And then it says open the app. Somebody wants to use it, and then you open the app, and then you play a game. So the two are connected, and then this one starts, and I'm now going to play against myself, so I'm going to have that one there. And I think I'm really smart, so I've gone up there, but I'm stupid because actually my opponent has won. So let's see. But if I actually go ahead and uninstall this app off here, so the scenario where you want to play with somebody and they don't even have your app, well, on the other one, I can invoke the tap to share app option, tap them together, and this time it says launch the store. Someone found something they thought you might like, so then you can take them straight to the page of your app in the store. I've got 5 stars on one rating. There you go. And you can install it. So it's a great way of sharing your app from within, actually within the app on the other side. So it's a nice little value add, a nice way of adding NFC support into your application. And there it goes. It's installing it onto that phone. But I'll let that down. So that's it. Those are my contact details. I'd love to hear from you if you're building apps or you want to ask me anything. So thank you very much. Those are my contact details. I'm around. I've got another talk to do tomorrow, so please come and chat to me. And thank you very much. Thanks.